Hey guys, it's CodeRosum here, and today we will learn how to implement authentication in our API. In the last videos, we learned how to connect to database, how to implement CRUD and data validation. So today we will add user registration and user login with token-based authentication. So let's get started. Honestly, I was planning to complete the comments module in this video, but I realized that it's almost the same as the post module we did a couple of videos ago. So you can do it alone, but I'll include the project files in the description down below. So today we will learn how to create users and how they can log into the system with token-based authentication. Unlike traditional web applications, we don't use sessions to log the user into the system. Instead, we are using something called token-based authentication. It's because these APIs are stateless, so they don't keep any data about the users. Instead, they generate a token. Users can get that token and include that in their request. So the API can understand that this is a valid token and this user is authenticated. So in this video, we will learn user registration and user login. Alright, so first of all, let's install some packages. I'm gonna open up the terminal and npm install -- save. Well, first package I'm gonna install is Bcryptjs. Well, this package is for hashing the password. Obviously, we cannot store the password in plain text in the database, so we need to hash the passwords. So this is the package we are using for that. And I'm gonna need another package for generating tokens. We cannot use sessions in our API because APIs are stateless. They don't store any kind of information about the clients. So instead, they use something called token-based authentication. So we need to generate tokens. For generating tokens, I'm going to use a package called JsonWebToken. And finally, I need another package called Nodemon. Well, this is not regarding authentication. This is for automatically restarting the Node.js application when we made the changes. Currently, we have to restart the server manually each time we make a change. So once this is installed, we don't have to do that. Alright, let's install these packages. Alright, so all the packages are installed. Now let's implement our authentication module. I'm gonna create a new controller. I'm gonna name that user.controller, and here first I'm gonna import the models. Alright, then the package, one of the packages we installed, Bcrypt. And the other package we installed, JsonWebToken. Alright, now I'm gonna create a new function. I'm gonna name that function Signup. So this is the function for creating users. Alright, just like we did before, request and response parameters. Alright, first let's create our user object. So this is the object we're gonna save in the table. The attributes of this object are name, then we get that name from the request body, request.body dot, we will put that as name, and email, oops, let me correct this. Finally, we need the password. We never store the password in plain text in the database. We are hashing the password, so here we need to include the hash password. But for now, I'm just gonna include the plain text password. I'll implement the hashing mechanism in a minute. Password. Alright, so just like before, just like we did in our post controller, let's insert this object to our table. For that, I'm gonna access the user model, and we can now call the inbuilt function of SQLize, which is create. Alright, create, and we can now pass this object to this, and this returns a promise, so we have to use this then keyword and this catch keyword. Well, if you are not familiar with these promises, I recommend you to watch this 10 minutes video, so that you can get a clear understanding about JavaScript promises. Alright, so this if this returns a successful response, we can get that, and we can call this arrow function if it is successful, and if it fails, we can pass another arrow function to run when that promise is failed. Alright, if the promise is successful, we can return a success response to the user, just like we did in our post controller. Here we passed a success response. So I'm gonna just copy one of these messages and I'm gonna paste down here. I'm just gonna remove some of the response body. Instead of user, instead of post, I'm gonna include user. Alright, user created successfully, or a similar message, maybe registration successful. Alright, and for the error, 500 error, something went wrong. Alright, I'm not done with this yet, but in order to test this, let's export this function and let's test this. I'm gonna export this module dot export, just like this, and I'm gonna create a new route file too. User.js. Here I'm gonna import express, oops, then the user controller, and router. Then I can define my endpoint, which is a post endpoint, and the URL segment is sign up. Then the controller method, user controller dot, the method name is sign up, just like this. Alright, then let's export the module. Alright, so let's import this route file to our app.js file. I'm gonna open up the app.js file, and here I'm gonna create a new constant with our user route. Routes user. Alright, and we need to include this prefix. We want all our user routes to start from user prefix, just like we did with our post route. Here user like this, so that all our user routes will start with this prefix. Alright, so this looks complete. Let's open up the terminal and let's start our Node.js application. npm start. Looks like we don't have any errors. I'm gonna open our API testing client and create a new request. I'm gonna name that sign up, and it is a post request with the JSON body, and the URL should be like http localhost and port 3000, user prefix, then sign up. Alright, for the request body, I'm gonna include name, demo user, and the email demo@demo.com. Let's just add some dummy content, and finally the password. Demo. Alright, so that's the request body we include in our sign up request. Let's hit this endpoint and let's see what happens. Okay, we get a success response. Let's check our database, users table, and of course we have created a new user. Well, like I said, I'm not done with this sign up function. I need to hash the password before saving to database. Let's implement that right now. Bcrypt has this inbuilt function called hash, and as the first argument we need to provide the plain text password, and as the second argument we need to provide something called salt. The idea behind salt is that it adds some random string to the end of your plain text password, so that your password is much harder to guess or be available on a dictionary table. Dictionary table is something kind of a database that contains the combination of some generic passwords and its hashed versions. So if someone got access to your database, he has all the hashed passwords, he cannot use them to log in, but he can check on those dictionary tables using the hash password in your database. If he found a match, he can get the plain text password using that. So that's a risk. By adding a salt, you add a random string to the end of your plain text password, so that the chances are less that it can be found in a dictionary table. So that's the idea behind adding a salt when hashing a password. As the third argument, we need to pass a callback function. Well, this is because this function is an asynchronous function. And here we need, as the parameters, we need to pass error and the result. The result is hash this function generates. Alright, and so that's the function for hashing the password. And we need another function for generating this salt. Well, Bcrypt has another inbuilt function called gensalt. And here we need to provide an integer as the number of rounds, and as the second parameter we need to pass another callback function. And here we need to include the parameters, error, and the result, which is salt. Alright, if you are not familiar with these callback functions, this is regarding asynchronous programming of JavaScript. Well, I suggest you to watch this 10 minutes video that explains everything about callback functions. Alright, so this second function should be inside the callback function of this gensalt function, and all of our other code should be inside this second callback function, just like this. And now we can use our hash password instead of the plain text password. Alright, so I think we are good to go. Let's open up the terminal and start our Node.js application. npm start, and let's test this with our API testing client. I'm gonna hit this endpoint. Okay, we get this success message. Looks like we don't have any errors. Let's check the database and let's see. Yes, our second user has been created with the hash password. See? Alright, so we have successfully implemented hashing mechanism of our system. I'm gonna hit this endpoint again and wait a minute. Well, there's something wrong with this payload. Here we use the same email for creating both users. As you can see in the database, we have multiple users with same email. Well, that can happen. So we need to check whether the email is already exist in the table. Alright, let's do that right now. So for that, I'm gonna use one of the inbuilt function in SQLize models user. Then the function is find one. With this function, we can check if the email already exists in the table. For this, I'm going to pass an object with where clause, and like this the column name, and then the user entered email, just like this. And this function also return a promise. Then we can use this then and catch keywords. If it returns a successful result, we can get that with this function, and if it doesn't, we can get that error with this function. Alright, so if it returns a successful result, we can check if it is true. If it is true, which means there is a user with that email, so we can simply pass an error message like this. For the status code, I'm gonna use 409 conflict, and the message should be like email already exist. And if it is not true, then we can run the rest of our code here. So first we check if the email already exists in the table. If it does, we simply return an error message, and if it doesn't, we can run the rest of the code, generating salt and hash, and finally inserting user to the database. Alright, so this looks fine, and let me test this. Opening the terminal, npm start. Looks like we don't have any errors. Let's open our API testing client, and I'm gonna send the request, and I get the error message for this email. I use the same email as I used in the previous request. Email already exists, and let me change this email a little bit and hit the endpoint, hit the send button again. Now the user created successfully. I can hit this button again and email already exists. So this is working as expected. We have successfully implemented sign up functionality of our API. Oops, let's add this error message to this catch block too. Alright, so that's the sign up function of our API. So what's next? Next, let's implement the login functionality. For the login functionality, I'm gonna write a new function, login, just like before, request and response. Here we have two steps. When the user enters the email and the password, first we need to identify if there is a record with that email, which means if there is a user registered with that email. So if there is a user, then we need to check if the passwords are matched. If they match, which means he is an authenticated user, so that we can generate a token, an access token for that user. So that's the functionality with this logging function. Alright, so let's implement that. I'm gonna use the user model. Oops. Models.user. Then we have an inbuilt function called find1, and here I'm gonna pass an object with where clause. The column name is email, and the value is the email field in the request body, just like this. And this method returns a promise. Then we can use this then keyword and this catch keyword. Then just like before, if it returns a successful result, which means a user, we can run a function, and if it returns an error, we can run another function. Alright, so if this object is null, If that object is null, which means there is no user with this email, so we can simply return an error response. Stated code is 401 unauthorized. We can add the message with something like invalid credentials. Alright, and if it is not null, then we can check the password. We can compare the password with the user entered password and the password in the database. For comparing passwords, Bcrypt has an inbuilt function called compare. In this method, as the first argument, we have to pass the plain text password which is entered by the user, and as the second argument we need to pass the hashed password which is in this user object. Alright, and then as the third argument we have to pass a callback function like this, and we can add parameters error and result. Okay, so if the result is true, which means passwords match. If the result is true, which means the passwords match, then we can generate a token, an access token for the user. Alright, let's first create a new constant, token. For generating the token, we use that JsonWebToken package we imported to our controller, JWT. It has a method called sign. Alright, we need to pass an object with the details we want to include in our token. I want to include email, and user ID, alright, and as the second parameter of this sign function we need to add a secret. I'm just gonna hard code this secret string here, but it's not a good practice. Normally you would want to include this secret as an environment variable. I'll get to that at the end of this tutorial. For now I'm just hard coding this here, and as the third argument just a callback function. Like I said, if you are not familiar with these callback functions, which is really easy, just watch this short tutorial I created. It explains everything about callback functions. Alright, so as the parameters we need to pass error and the token. The result is the token. Alright, so in the body of this callback function we can return a success message like this. The status code should be 200 and the message should be authentication successful and then the token, just like that. and we can include some message over here as well. Something went wrong in case of some internal server error. And I forgot to add the else clause of this if statement. If this is not true, which means the authentication failed, so we can send the same response here as well. All right, this is looking good. Let's export that here. Oops, login. All right, and we can open the route file of the user. We can create a new route. It is a post request. Login, and the user controller function name is login. All right, so let's restart the server and test this with our API testing client. All right, we don't have any errors. I'm gonna create a new request. Request name is login, and it is a post request with the JSON body. For the JSON body, email, and the password. URL should be http localhost port 3000 user, then login. And before sending this request, let me clear the database users table, because there are some users with plain text password. So this is an inconsistent data structure. So let's clear the database, and we don't have any users. Let's create a user first. So let me the demo user, demo@demo.com, password is demo. All right, hit the endpoint. User created successfully. Then the login endpoint, email is demo@demo.com, password is demo. Let's hit this request and let's see what happens. Oops, I have a typo here. All right, yes, we successfully generate the token with this authentication successful message. So we entered the email and the password correct. Let me change the password to a wrong password and hit that endpoint again. Then we get the response of invalid credentials. What if the email is incorrect? Then we get the same invalid credential response. So this is looking good. This is working as expected. So we have successfully implemented the authentication functionality of our API. So as a homework, you can add data validation to these two functions, just like we did in our post controller. We implemented this validation. So just like we did here, you can add that validation to sign up method and login method to make sure the email and password are not empty, or they are valid emails or not, just like that. So do it as a homework so that this module is complete. Before winding up this video, let's just add one more thing, which is Nodemon. For now, currently we have to restart the server each time we make a change to our code. But with Nodemon, we don't have to manually restart the server because it automatically does that. For that, we installed the package Nodemon initially. Now I'm gonna open up this package.json file, and here in the script array, I just wanna add new field called start. Here, as the command, I just type Nodemon and the script, which is the server.js. Alright, so hit save and open up the terminal. Now run npm start. This will start the server with Nodemon. Now I'm gonna open one of my controllers and I make a slight change. I'll add a comment. Just like this. Then I hit save. Then as you can see, Nodemon restart the application automatically, so that we don't have to manually restart the server each time we make a change. So this is really easy when we are doing the development. Keep in mind that this is a development dependency. We don't want to do that in the production environment, just a development dependency. Alright, so that's been it. That's how we can add the authentication to our API. In the next video, we will learn how to add a middleware and protect some routes so that only the authenticated users can access those resources. Alright, so stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys very soon in the next video.